Alienation is the precise and correctly applied word for describing the major social problem in Britain today. People feel alienated by society. In some intellectual circles, it is treated almost as a new phenomenon. It has, however, been with us for years. What I believe to be true is that today it is more widespread, more pervasive than ever before. Let me right at the outset define what I mean by alienation. It is the cry of men who feel themselves the victims of blind economic forces beyond their control. The frustration of ordinary people excluded from the processes of decision making. The feeling of despair and hopelessness that pervades people who feel, with some justification, that they have no real say in shaping or determining their own destinies. Many may not have rationalised it, may not even understand, may not be able to articulate it, but they feel it. It conditions and colours their social attitudes. Alienation expresses itself different ways by different people. It is to be found in what the courts often describe as the criminal antisocial behaviour of a section of the community. It is expressed by those young people who want to opt out of society, by dropouts, the so-called maladjusted, those who seek to escape permanently from the reality of society through the use of intoxicants and narcotics. Of course, it would be wrong to say it was the sole reason for these things, but it is a much greater factor in all of them than is generally recognised. Society and its prevailing sense of values leads to another form of alienation. It alienates some from humanity. It partially dehumanises some people, makes them insensitive, ruthless in their handling of fellow human beings, self-centred and grasping. The irony is they are often considered normal and well-adjusted. It is my sincere contention that anyone who can be totally adjusted to our society is in greater need of psychiatric analysis and treatment than anyone else. It is easy and tempting to hate such people. However, it is wrong. They are as much a product of society and a consequence of that society as the poor dropout. They are losers. They have lost essential elements of our common humanity. Man is a social being. Real fulfilment for any person lies in service to his fellow men and women. The big challenge to civilization is not permissiveness, although I agree our society is much too permissive. Any society which, for example, permits over 1 million people to be unemployed is far too permissive for my liking. Nor is it moral laxity in the narrow sense in which this word is generally expressed. It does involve morality, ethics, and a concept of human values. The real challenge we face is in rooting out anything and everything that distorts and devalues human relations. Let me give 2 examples from contemporary experience to illustrate the point. Recently on television I saw an advertisement. The scene is a banquet. A gentleman is on his feet proposing a toast. His speech is full of phrases like, "this full-bodied specimen." Sitting beside him is a young, buxom woman. The image she projects is not pompous, but foolish. She is visibly preening herself, believing herself to be the object of this bloke's eulogy. Then he concludes, "And now I give..." Then the brand name of what used to be described as Empire Sherry. The woman is shattered, hurt, and embarrassed. Then the laughter. Derisive, cruel laughter. The real point is this. In this charade, the viewers were obviously expected not to identify with the victim, but with her tormentors. The other illustration is the widespread implicit acceptance of the concept and term the rat race. The image it conjures up is one where we are all scurrying around, scrambling for position, trampling on each other, backstabbing, all in pursuit of personal success. To the students I address this appeal. Reject these attitudes. Reject the values and false morality that underlie these attitudes. A rat race is for rats. We're not rats, we're human beings. Reject the insidious pressures by society that would blunt your critical faculties to all that is happening around you, that would caution silence in the face of injustice, lest it jeopardise your chances of promotion and self-advancement. This is where it starts, and before you know it, you are a fully paid-up member of the rat pack. The price is too high. It entails the loss of your dignity and human spirit, or, as Christ put it, what doth it profit a man if he gain the whole world and suffer the loss of his soul? Profit is the sole criterion used by the establishment to evaluate economic activity. From the rat race to lame ducks, the vocabulary in vogue is a giveaway. It is more reminiscent of a human menagerie than human society. The power structures that have inevitably emerged from this approach threaten and undermine our hard-won democratic rights. The whole process is towards the centralisation and concentration of power in fewer and fewer hands. The facts are there for all who want to see. Giant monopoly companies and consortia dominate almost every branch of our economy. The men who wield effective control within these giants exercise a power over their fellow men that is frightening and is a negation of democracy. Government by the people, for the people, becomes meaningless unless it involves major economic decision-making by the people, for the people. This is not simply an economic matter. In essence, it is an ethical and moral question, for whoever takes the important economic decisions in society ipso facto determines the social priorities of that society. From the Olympian heights of an executive suite, in an atmosphere where success is judged by the extent to which you can maximise profits, the overwhelming tendency must be to see people as units of production, as indices in your accountant's books. To appreciate fully the inhumanity of the situation, you have to see the hurt and despair in the eyes of a man suddenly told he is redundant without provision made for suitable alternative employment. Someone, somewhere, had decided he is unwanted, unneeded, and is to be thrown on the industrial scrap heap. From the very depth of my being, I challenge the right of any man or group of men in business or in government to tell a fellow human being that he or she is expendable. Everything that is proposed by the establishment seems almost calculated to minimise the role of the people, to miniaturise man. I can understand how attractive a prospect that must be to those at the top. Those of us who refuse to be pawns in their power game can be picked up by their bureaucratic tweezers and dropped in a filing cabinet under M for malcontent or maladjusted. When you think of some of the high flats around us, it can hardly be called an accident that they are as near as one could get to an architectural representation of a filing cabinet. If modern technology requires greater and larger productive units, let us make our wealth-producing resources and potential subject to public control and social accountability. Let us gear our society to social need, not personal greed. Given such creative reorientation of society, there is no doubt in my mind that in a few years we could eradicate in our country the scourge of poverty, the underprivileged, slums, and insecurity. Even this is not enough. To measure social progress purely by material advance is not enough. The aim must be the enrichment of the whole quality of life. It involves a social and cultural, or if you wish, spiritual transformation of our country, a necessary part of which must be the restructuring of our institutions of government and, where necessary, the evolution of additional structures so as to involve the people in the decision-making processes of our society. The so-called experts will tell you that this would be cumbersome and marginally inefficient. I am prepared to sacrifice a margin of efficiency for the value of people's participation. Anyway, in the longer term, I reject this argument. To unleash the latent potential of our people, it is necessary we give them responsibility. I am convinced that the great mass of our people go through life without even a glimmer of what they could have contributed to their fellow human beings. This is a personal tragedy. It is a social crime. The flowering of each individual's personality and talents is a precondition for everyone's development. In this context, education has a vital role to play. If automation and technology are accompanied, as they must be, with full employment, then the leisure time available to man will be massively increased. If this is so, then our whole concept of education will have to change. The whole object must be to equip and educate people for life, not solely for work or a profession. The creative use of leisure in communion with and in service to our fellow human beings can and must become an important element in self-fulfillment. Let me conclude by affirming what I hope and certainly intend to be the spirit of this address, and that is an affirmation of faith in humanity. All that is good in our cultural heritage involves a recognition of our common humanity, an unashamed acknowledgement that man is good by nature. Burns expressed it in a poem that technically was not his best, yet captured the spirit in Why Should We Idly Waste Our Prime? The golden age will then revive, each man will be a brother. In harmony we all shall live and share the earth together. In virtue trained, enlightened youth will love each fellow creature, and time shall surely prove the truth that man is good by nature. It is my belief that the factors for making a practical reality of such a society are maturing now. I would like to think that our generation took mankind some way along the road towards the goal. It's a goal worth fighting for.